There are men who chase fortune, and there are men chosen by fortune itself. John D. Rockefeller was not merely a businessman. He was a manifestation of an ancient law, the silent covenant between discipline, vision, and divine order. He did not stumble upon wealth, he aligned with it. In a world fueled by chaos, Rockefeller understood something few men ever realize, that money is not earned first in the world, it is summoned in the mind. Every coin, every contract, every oil barrel that bore his name was born from a mental frequency he had mastered long before the world saw his empire. He lived by a truth as old as the pyramids. The universe does not reward movement, it rewards alignment. Rockefeller moved with intention, as if every step was guided by an unseen rhythm, a rhythm he called order, and order became his religion. From his youth, he tithed 10% of every dollar he earned, not out of superstition, but because he understood exchange. He believed the act of giving aligned him with abundance, and abundance responded to him like an iron to a magnet. He once said, "I would rather earn 1% off 100 men's efforts than 100% off my own." This was not greed, it was geometry, the sacred mathematics of leverage. While others sought to control, Rockefeller sought structure. He built systems that multiplied energy, human, financial, spiritual. But the true foundation of his power was not Standard Oil, it was inner order. Each morning he sat in silence before the day began. He wrote every transaction, every detail with a monk's devotion. To him, money was not chaos, it was a current, and whoever mastered the current could command destiny. The world saw him as ruthless, but those who looked deeper saw something else, a man who obeyed a higher discipline, who lived by laws invisible to the market. He believed success was not a blessing, it was a response, and the world always responds to the man who knows what he wants. When oil burst from the ground in Pennsylvania, men saw opportunity. Rockefeller saw order in the chaos. While they rushed to dig, he studied. While they gambled, he calculated. He was not chasing oil, he was chasing permanence. He knew wealth that arrives fast leaves faster, but wealth built on principle becomes eternal. In every negotiation, in every moment of apparent pressure, he moved with calm precision, as if his soul had already seen the outcome before it happened. This was the hidden law of greatness. The outer world bends to the man whose inner world is unshakable. And that was Rockefeller's secret. He never fought the current, he became the current. You see, wealth is not about numbers, it's about frequency. It is not about how much you work, it's about who you become while you work. Rockefeller's empire was not built by hands, it was built by mind. A mind that understood that time is the ultimate currency and order is its only multiplier. Never allow chaos to enter your day, he would say, for chaos is the thief of energy. He did not serve money. Money served him because he served law, and that law was simple: master yourself, and the world will bow before you. The richest man in history was not a man of luck nor privilege. He was a man of structure, a man who discovered that the mind, when disciplined, can build empires greater than gold. For the true wealth of Rockefeller was never in his banks, it was in his state of consciousness. Before you command money, command your mind. Before you seek fortune, seek order. This is the hidden law of greatness. Power is not given, it is prepared for. Discipline, that was Rockefeller's altar. Every act, every decision, every silence was a ritual of control. While the world admired his wealth, they never understood his restraint. They saw only the vastness of his empire, but never the structure that held it together. To Rockefeller, power was not expansion, it was containment. He believed that a man who cannot govern himself has no right to govern anything at all. His mornings began before dawn, not with haste, but with order. Every letter written, every number noted, as if he were a scribe documenting divine law. He used to say, "I can measure a man by the way he keeps his books." To most, that sounded trivial, but for him, it was a test of inner alignment. He believed that chaos on paper was chaos in the mind, and chaos in the mind was the death of vision. In the silence of his study, he trained his spirit like a warrior trains his sword, not to fight others, but to subdue himself. When temptations rose, greed, anger, pride, he treated them as storms to be observed, not enemies to be slain. He knew that emotion is energy, and energy must be directed, not wasted. He moved through life like a sculptor, chiseling away at everything unnecessary. Even his words were measured, his movements deliberate. The man who cannot be still cannot hear the whisper of opportunity. He waited with patience that seemed supernatural. While others rushed into ventures, he studied the terrain, the men, the laws, until certainty replaced chance. That was his greatest weapon, patience sharpened by discipline. To Rockefeller, waiting was not weakness, it was strategy in motion. He once said, "I always tried to turn every disaster into an opportunity." That is the mind of discipline, to see in every obstacle a seed of advantage. But behind that strength was faith, not the kind recited in churches, but the quiet faith born from repetition and order. He believed God rewarded structure and that the universe bends toward the man who moves in harmony with its laws. He would not invest unless the numbers sang in tune. He would not speak unless silence had first agreed. He would not act until clarity replaced emotion. This was not hesitation, it was alignment. Each day, his notebooks filled with figures, forecasts, prayers. He merged spiritual devotion with financial precision, and in doing so, turned money into something sacred. For him, balance sheets were scripture, profit was confirmation, and loss was correction. He treated both success and failure with the same composure, because he understood emotion is the enemy of endurance. Rockefeller once faced the panic of 1873, a financial storm that drowned empires. Banks collapsed, companies vanished overnight, but he stood still. While others ran, he expanded. While others begged for mercy, he bought their assets with calm, silent precision. Reporters called him cold, but what they did not see was a man who had spent decades mastering his own inner weather. He had learned that panic is a symptom of ignorance, and ignorance is the costliest currency on earth. He said, "When a man masters his fear, he becomes untouchable." Discipline made him untouchable, because discipline is not a cage, it is a weapon disguised as restraint. He knew that real freedom does not come from doing whatever you want, but from doing only what is necessary.
Every empire collapses from indulgence before it falls to enemies, and so Rockefeller treated indulgence as poison. Luxury did not impress him, order did. Noise did not move him, silence did. In his home, simplicity reigned. His desk was immaculate, his time sacred. He believed that clutter was a thief of divine focus, and in that focus he found power. He once wrote, "I believe the power to make money is a gift from God, to be developed and used to the best of one's ability." Notice his words, developed, used. He did not say taken or claimed, because to him power was not owned. It was borrowed from a higher order and could be taken back if abused. So he disciplined himself not to deserve power, but to sustain it. For discipline is the architecture of greatness. It is the invisible structure behind every enduring empire. Men who rise without it burn quickly. Men who build through it become legends. Rockefeller's genius was not his wealth, it was his inner engineering, the ability to turn chaos into system, emotion into movement, and time into legacy. He lived by one final creed, a truth whispered in his diaries and echoed in his silence. Self-control is the foundation of empire. He did not chase control of others, he mastered control of self, and in doing so, became the most powerful man alive.
There are men who chase money, and there are men who enter into a covenant with it. Rockefeller belonged to the second kind. To him, wealth was not a possession, it was a partnership. A sacred dialogue between human will and divine order. He saw money not as an idol to worship, but as a force to be honored. A living current, responsive, intelligent, and moral. He said once, "God gave me money," but what he truly meant was, God entrusted me with it. He believed that prosperity was not a reward, it was a responsibility, a contract written not in ink, but in conduct. From his earliest earnings, he gave before he gained. 10% of every coin returned to the source that sent it. It was not a superstition, it was a technology of gratitude. He knew the invisible law. What you give with purpose multiplies. What you hoard with fear decays. And so he gave, not only money, but intention. He saw each act of generosity as planting a tree in the unseen world. And when the time came, those trees bore fruit in forms men called luck. Rockefeller's covenant was simple. Serve the law of circulation, and abundance will serve you. He observed that water stagnates when it does not flow, and so does wealth. He made sure his fortune never stopped moving through donations, investments, and faith. He built hospitals, universities, foundations, not for fame, but to keep his current alive. He said, "I believe it is every man's duty to make all he can and to give all he can." That was the rhythm of his wealth, creation and circulation, intention and expansion. And because he obeyed that rhythm, money obeyed him. But this covenant required something deeper, trust. When markets collapsed, when oil prices fell, he did not panic. He prayed. He gave more. To those around him, it seemed madness, but to him,
It was alignment. He knew that fear interrupts flow and that faith restores it. "Do not chase money," he wrote once. "Chase value, and money will follow you like a shadow." He treated money as a mirror. It reflected his internal state. If chaos appeared in his finances, he looked within, not outward. That is the essence of the covenant. The world outside bends to the vibration inside. Rockefeller was not serving wealth, he was serving law. And law never fails those who walk in its rhythm. He believed that gratitude is the frequency of abundance, and that the truly rich are not those who collect, but those who circulate. So he gave until giving became his nature, and the more he gave, the larger the current became, until the entire world felt its ripple. This is the paradox of the covenant. You never lose what you give with faith. Rockefeller's fortune became eternal because it was alive, flowing, expanding, blessing, building. Money in his hands became light. And that is the true secret of his empire. He did not own wealth, he embodied it. To enter the covenant of wealth, the voice whispers, you must give before you gain, trust before you see, and bless before you receive.
Legacy is not what you leave behind. It is what continues to move when you are gone. Rockefeller understood this before he built his empire. He was not interested in being rich. He wanted to be remembered. And to be remembered, a man must build not for his time, but for time itself. He believed that wealth without purpose is dust, and purpose without structure is wind. So he merged both into one force, a system of meaning that could outlive him. He once said, "I believe every right implies a responsibility, every opportunity an obligation, every possession a duty." That was his code. To him, every dollar carried a soul, every creation had a consequence, and every action had an echo. While others built for applause, he built for continuity. He did not seek fame, he sought function. He was not moved by recognition, but by rhythm, by permanence, by law. He viewed life as a relay, a chain of souls carrying the same torch through generations. And his role was not to finish the race, but to ensure the flame never died. So he built institutions, not monuments. Hospitals that would heal when he no longer could. Universities that would teach what he could no longer say. Foundations that would give when his hands had turned to dust. He understood something sacred. Wealth that ends with you was never wealth. It was indulgence. True prosperity must outlive its source. For Rockefeller, legacy was a mirror of discipline. It was not about name or glory, but about systems of impact. He believed that a man's value is not measured by what he owns, but by how many lives continued to breathe because of his design. He built his fortune as a tree and planted his roots in service. The fruit fed generations, but the roots were invisible, hidden in values, principles, and law. He raised his children with that same code. He taught them that inheritance is not money, it is mentality. That fortune without philosophy
becomes a curse. And so he passed down not comfort, but command, not indulgence, but structure. He built within his bloodline a new form of wealth, spiritual architecture. He believed God gives abundance not to enrich one man, but to expand his work through him. And to misuse that gift is to break the covenant. His code was written in silence, but expressed in every decision. Give, build, sustain, expand, repeat. That repetition, that rhythm, became eternal. And so his legacy became a living current, not frozen in marble, but pulsing through the veins of the world. Even now, his name is spoken not as a memory, but as a principle. Rockefeller no longer describes a man. It describes an idea, the union of order, generosity, and divine purpose. He believed that if a man's name is to survive time, it must be carved into the minds of others, not into stone. He did not chase eternity. He became compatible with it. And that is the ultimate code of legacy, to build systems so aligned with universal law that time itself becomes your ally. He used to say that a man's real worth is measured by the number of people he empowers to act in his absence. To create systems that continue without you is to achieve the closest thing to immortality. While others sought control, he sought continuity. He didn't want to be the flame. He wanted to be the spark that creates new flames. His legacy was never in the billions he earned. It was in the billions of moments that his actions made possible after he was gone. You can still feel it in the hospitals that carry his name, in the research that healed millions, in the scholarships that changed destinies. That is the unseen empire, built not of oil or iron, but of influence and intention. And you too, if you wish to walk that same path, must stop asking how to make more and start asking how to make it last. Because wealth without continuity dies with applause, but wealth aligned with legacy becomes a current that outlives memory. Rockefeller understood that to rule time, you must think beyond it, and to think beyond it, you must surrender to something greater than self. For the highest level of wealth is not accumulation, it is perpetuation. When the mind moves with the rhythm of eternity, money becomes only the ink used to write your influence upon generations. That is why his name became more than history. It became archetype, a reminder that fortune is fleeting, but alignment is eternal. His empire was built not on oil, but on obedience, to divine order, to purpose, to law. And that obedience wrote his name into the bloodstream of civilization, because the true code of legacy is simple. Build not for profit, but for permanence. Give not to appear good, but to remain useful. Live not to be remembered, but to ensure that something greater continues. When a man reaches that state, death no longer erases him. It only multiplies him. That was Rockefeller's secret. That was the code. And time itself bowed before it.
Inside every empire, there is a temple. And inside every man who builds an empire, there is an altar unseen. Rockefeller's greatest construction was not Standard Oil, it was himself. His empire began in silence, in the chamber of his own mind, where thoughts were prayers and decisions were sacrifices. He believed the mind of man is the true sanctuary of God, and to desecrate that space with fear or noise was to close the gate of abundance itself. He guarded his inner world as a priest guards the sacred flame. Each morning, he entered that silence, not to ask for fortune, but to listen. For he knew the world does not answer words, it answers states of being. The calm within him became the architecture of his destiny. He did not command men by force, he commanded them by frequency. In his stillness, he became magnetic. In his discipline, he became inevitable. He treated every thought as a seed, and he planted only those that would feed his purpose. He once said that his greatest secret was his ability to sit quietly until clarity arrived. That stillness, that patience, it was prayer disguised as logic. He built his fortune not with speed, but with serenity, because he understood the rhythm of creation. First silence, then vision, then manifestation. This was his inner altar, the meeting point between the divine and the deliberate. He believed every man must build such a place within himself, a space untouched by the world, where purpose can be heard in its purest form. He would often remind his children that wealth without stillness becomes noise without direction. For money amplifies who you are, and if you are lost, it multiplies the confusion. So he remained centered. He walked among kings, yet thought like a monk. He ruled industries, yet bowed to silence. That paradox, power and humility, was the signature of his genius. He never allowed outer victories to invade his inner peace. He lived by an unwritten commandment: guard your mind as your kingdom. Because he knew every external empire collapses the moment the inner one is neglected. He saw men rise and fall by their own unrest. He saw wealth devour those who worshipped it. And so he worshipped not gold, but order, not status, but stability, not power, but peace. He knew true prosperity is not having more, it is needing less. And in that simplicity, he found dominion. The altar he built within was not made of stone, but of habits, discipline, gratitude, meditation, restraint. He understood that abundance flows through form, and form begins in thought. To master thought is to open the gates of reality. When asked the source of his composure amid chaos, he said, "I am not moved by the market. I am moved by purpose." He was not reacting to the world was reacting to him. That is the mystery of the altar. When your inner frequency is pure, reality bends in response. He treated silence as strategy. He treated gratitude as currency. He treated calmness as armor, because he had learned that no man can serve two masters, and fear is the false god that rules most. His faith was not blind, it was structured. He trusted in law, not chance, in cause, not coincidence. And so he created his own weather. Where others saw storms, he saw signals. Where others panicked, he prepared. His peace was not passivity, it was power disguised as patience. He became a living example of this truth. The man who masters his mind masters matter. For everything external is born from the internal, and every fortune begins as a state of consciousness. That is why his wealth endured, because it was not anchored in numbers, but in nature. His altar became the blueprint of his empire,
and through it, he communed with the unseen order of things. He understood that God does not favor the loud, but the aligned. And so he lived as a man perpetually aligned with silence, law, and purpose. Rockefeller did not die rich. He became wealth in principle, in vibration, in memory. Because the man who builds his altar within leaves a kingdom without. And that kingdom, when born of order, can never fall.
Now you know. Wealth was never about money. It was about mastery. You came seeking the secret of Rockefeller, but the secret was never his. It was the law that shaped him, the same law that sleeps inside you. The universe has no favorites. It has frequencies, and the one who aligns ascends. Rockefeller was not chosen, he chose. He chose silence over noise, order over chaos, faith over fear. And because of that, the world bent in his direction. Every empire begins the same way, not in the market, not in the soil, but in the mind. The invisible blueprint of destiny is drawn in thought long before the first brick is laid. He knew this, and now so do you. You have walked through his principles, through the laws that made him eternal. Discipline, faith, gratitude, purpose, and alignment. But if you stop here, you've missed the final code. Because wealth is not something you build, it is something you become. When your mind becomes orderly, your life becomes magnetic. When your spirit becomes still, your path becomes inevitable. When you give, you enter the covenant that multiplies everything you touch. These are not theories, they are mechanics of the unseen. The same current that moved through Rockefeller waits for the one who learns to stand still inside chaos and listen. The mind is the altar. The thought is the prayer. The act is the sacrifice. And legacy is the echo that eternity sends back to the obedient. Do not worship success. It was never the goal. The goal is alignment, because alignment births abundance, and abundance births peace. Every moment you choose silence over reaction, you move closer to that sacred order. Every time you give with gratitude, you open another gate of provision. Every time you master your thought, you rewrite the geometry of your reality. That is the truth Rockefeller lived by. That is the code the ancients whispered, and that is the voice speaking now. Not from me, but from within you, because every human being carries two empires, the one he rules outside and the one that rules within. One is temporary, the other is eternal. So build the eternal one first. Guard it, honor it, feed it with order, discipline, and gratitude. And then, without resistance, without effort, the outer one will rise to mirror it. Do not chase wealth, chase wholeness, for the man who becomes whole commands all things. That is the law. That is the covenant. That is the altar within. Now you know, and once you know, you can never return to blindness. Walk as Rockefeller walked, not as a collector of gold, but as a keeper of light. Because the true rich are not the ones who possess much, but the ones who command themselves. You have heard his story, but the next chapter will be written by you.